Today we're going to learn how to tie your tzitzis. Some call them tzitzit, it's the same thing. In order to tie your tzitzis, you're going to need 4 items. The first you'll need is the straightforward 4 corners garment. You can purchase some of them with black and white stripes, some with just plain white. Some of them you'll find in cotton and others out of wool. As long as it has 4 unique, clear corners, you have what you need. You'll also need strings. The strings usually come tied in a very pretty manner, just like this. However, once we get going, we'll unravel them and they'll look very different. You will also need on the side, and it'll help you as you tie the strings, something heavy that will sit on the table nicely. I've chosen my Palm Pilot for this purpose. And one more little item that will really help you as you try to thread the strings through the holes is a bobby pin. Although the strings, when they come originally from the store ready to use and ready to tie, they come beautifully tied in the fashion you're seeing right here. In reality, there are 2 separate sets of strings over here. You have 4 longer ones and the rest are shorter ones. Therefore, the first thing you have to do is unravel the tzitzis, unravel the strings, and ensure that you keep the longer ones separate. It won't be too difficult, because once you have unraveled them, you will see very clearly which are the longer 4 and which ones are shorter. So we untie it. This is the fun part. And then those few that were there tied around the rest are actually the longer ones, and the other ones are far shorter. So once you have the longer strings and shorter strings in separate piles, all you have to do is separate one of the longer ones, called the shamish, and 3 of the shorter ones. For each corner, that's all you'll need. 1 long one and 3 short ones. The rest of the strings, for now, you can put on the side till later. Now that we have the 3 shorter strings and the 1 longer string, we put them together, as close as we can together, and this is where bobby pins are very helpful. I find it very convenient to use the pin, to slide it over the tzitzis, and then use the pin as my guide to make my way through the very small hole. As you're putting the tzitzis through, the strings through the hole, you should say the words L'shem mitzvahs tzitzis, which literally means in the name of the mitzvah of tzitzis. Then you can discard the pin for now. We'll come back to that for the next corner later. Then you want to pull the strings through until, roughly speaking, the 8 strings come to an end at the same place. Obviously, that'll never happen exactly, particularly bearing in mind the shamish is a lot longer than the rest. And therefore, you want to end where roughly the other 7 come together. Now that your strings meet at roughly the same point at the other end, it would be wise to hold on for the next few seconds on both sides of the garment, whilst you take one side, either one is fine, and just make a straightforward knot. Whilst making that knot, say the words L'shem mitzvahs tzitzis, as we said before, and we tie the knot. It is ideal if one makes the knot just so that the garment creases slightly, in order that from now on the knot will remain on this side of the garment and not at the bottom. It is a special requirement to have the tzitzis coming off the side of the garment, not from the bottom. Now that you've made the first knot, you have to now go and do the same thing again. Make a second knot. However, I personally recommend using the other set of 4 strings in order to balance out the length of the 2 sides. Again, whilst tying your knot, you say the words L'shem mitzvahs tzitzis. Now starts the perhaps more complicated part of the process, because you have to try your best to keep these 4 strings and the other 4 strings separate throughout. And therefore, I like to tie a slip knot. You are not supposed to tie a real knot at this point. Tie a slip knot at the end obviously the end, which only has 4 regular strings, not the 3 plus the shamash. And then you separate the shamash from the rest. Take the other 7 strings together, and this is where your heavyweight will come into effect. Just to keep it in place, it'll be far easier to do the tying part next. So you now take your shamash and you wrap for the first time 7 wraps around the other 7. In so doing, again, you say the words L'Shem Mitzvahs Tzitzis. At this point, you'll want to check that you actually do have 7 twists, because often you'll find you've missed a half along the way. So try your best to get 7, or at least something within a half of 7. And then you need to go back to the other 7 strings. So now you can release the weight, separate the 2 lots of strings, so now you have 3 and 4, and send the shamash back home with the other 3 that belong in its set. Now you have again 2 sets of 4 strings, and simply tie a double knot. L'Shem Mitzvahs Tzitzis. L'Shem Mitzvahs Tzitzis. If you've got this far, the rest of tzitzis making is actually very straightforward, because the next 3 lots of twists and double knots follow the exact same procedure as we've just gone through, with one difference. The next time you twist, you won't do 7 turns, but rather 8. Then you'll do 11 and then 13. So when you've tied the next lot of ties, this time with 8 twists, it looks just the same. Double knot, 7 turns, double knot, 8 turns, double knot. Next we do 11. So the next stage, we now have the 11 ties. I try very hard to keep the double knots equal distance from each other. So although you only have 7 turns here and 11 there, you still want to try to make sure that the distance between the double knots on each side of them are equal. 13, of course, is the next challenge. So let's try. Well, again, as we've done till now, separate the shamash from the other 7 and keep them together. We'll place the weight on top of those 7, and then we will twist. L'Shem Mitzvahs Tzitzis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Just by the way, it doesn't make a difference whether you tie your strings towards you or away from you. I personally find it easier doing it away from me, but either way is absolutely kosher. Before I tie my knots, I always double check that I do have the right number. It saves time in undoing knots and then redoing them. In this case, I'm missing about a half, so I'm going to add the extra one to make sure I get that half in. Usually when tying knots, you tend to lose a half anyway in the process. And once you've done your 13 twists, you now reunite the shamash with the other 3 on its own team, as before, and you tie your double knot. L'Shem Mitzvahs Tzitzis. And if possible, tighten the knot a bit tighter to keep the distance equal between the 7 and the 13. You require a double knot. So far you've done 1. Take a little tip from me and don't yet tie the double knot. In fact, tie it only partially. L'Shem Mitzvahs Tzitzis. And then wait until you can put it under boiling hot water. Leave the knot just like that. Place this section of the strings under boiling hot water, and then the fibers of the string open up. They swell with heat and with water. Then you tie the knot properly. L'Shem Mitzvahs Tzitzis. And usually we find that once the strings dry, the knot remains in place for a much longer period of time. Now that you have done all of your double knots and all of your ties, now you can actually release the slip knot. and you actually have your first corner of your tzitzis fully made. Double knot 7, double knot 8, double knot 11, double knot 13, and double knot with the strings coming out. Now you have one of your 4 corners complete. Don't forget there are 3 more still. 1 on the same side and 2 more on the other side. That's why you'll have to come back now to the rest of your strings. Repeat the same process all over again, and you'll have a beautiful beged, a beautiful garment, fully made with kosher tzitzis.